Hello, my name is Kate Rees from the Faculty of Arts at the University of Adelaide, and I'm here with my colleague Isabel Sadeghi. We want to welcome you to the Thinking Postgraduate webinar series. Today we're going to hear about the Master of Teaching Middle and Secondary. We have the Q&A function available for you, so if you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the Q&A. We'll try to answer them as we go via the Q&A and also leave some time for questions to be answered live at the end of the presentation. So now I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Steven Stolz, who is the Program Coordinator for the Master of Teaching. Thanks, Steven.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks for the introduction and welcome everyone. I would just like to start by talking about why become a teacher. Now, you might be wondering why this is a good, or why a question to ask, but it will make sense in a minute in relation to some of the entry requirements. But first and foremost, it's actually quite useful to give some thought about why you want to become a teacher. There are a whole range of reasons, but the most often one that's kind of put forward, particularly in the research, is that people are generally passionate about a particular discipline area, and as a result want to inculcate that discipline area or tradition with young people. And I just use that as an obvious example because most people, particularly in the secondary school context, tend to be discipline experts and very passionate about a particular area. And maybe that might be something that's drawing you to become a teacher yourself. And so it is worthwhile thinking about, particularly in relation to the teaching capability statement, which is one of the entry requirements, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. So why study at the University of Adelaide? Now, I'm going to jump around a bit here, and that's intentional, but first and foremost, the reason why I want to start off with this first point is that, look, I think it's really important that you understand that the University of Adelaide is one of the top universities, not only in Australia, but the world. And so that really actually counts for something. And that means that you will have access to some of the best lectures and some of the most experienced teachers in the greater Adelaide area in some of your courses. And so that really matters in relation to the degree here at the University of Adelaide. Some of the other points here I'll just quickly refer to is that we have an Apple teacher status, and one of my colleagues, Walter, who will take that program, is highly exceptional and leads that program, and you'll get to meet him at different times in the degree. You'll see that it's a 2-year program, and there are 2 offerings. There's a 1.5 years degree offering, which is an accelerator program. And of course, there's the 2-year program, which are both accredited with the local jurisdiction or the local teacher entity called Teacher Registration Board of South Australia. It's designed and delivered by, as I've mentioned before, some of the top academics in Australia, and you'll have obviously access to some very experienced teachers in the greater Adelaide area. Great opportunity to combine practical skills with cutting edge research. You'll have an opportunity for approximately 70 days of professional experience. And then of course, it's accredited here in South Australia and has a lot of utility and portability overseas. Who's this for? Well, look, if you have a degree, a bachelor's degree, or nearly completing a bachelor's degree, and you can clearly identify 2 teaching areas, and you have an interest in teaching, then I would say that the Master of Teaching degree could possibly be for you. Entry requirements. Well, as I mentioned before, a bachelor's degree is a bare minimum, but of course, if you are near completion, then you could do a conditional application based on obviously you need to factor in your satisfactory completion of your degree, but that still doesn't mean you can't have a seamless transition. And that's why I say you just need to be near completion at the time of your application. Do also note, if you are from overseas or an international person, it needs to be from a higher educational institution that's recognised from the University of Adelaide. And if need to, that can be, those answers can be provided for you. You need to also identify 2 teaching areas, a major and a minor. And do be aware that your transcripts are looked at very closely. And so they need to be clearly demarcated and easily identifiable, or it becomes a problem, more so in terms of entering the course and the degree, because if you don't have 2 teaching areas, then we obviously can't obviously you can't satisfy the requirements of the degree. And so that's why I just make mention to you that I go through as the program director and look at a lot of the entry applications that come through with my colleague from the student admin centre, admin team, sorry, at the Faculty of Arts. And unfortunately, there are a number of high calibre kind of applicants. However, they don't have two clearly demarked or clearly identified teaching areas, which is really unfortunate. However, we can provide feedback on how you can make that bridge between that and becoming a teacher. So please don't think if that doesn't apply to you, we can't cater for you in some form or another. It might be a case of you do a bridging course at the University of Adelaide, or you complete some series of courses at the University of Adelaide in order to kind of enter the degree. So please don't think that it's all over Red Rover for you. Fourth dot point down, we're looking for a GPA of around about 5. And of course, as I mentioned earlier on, a teaching capability statement is a series of questions you'll be asked where a series of, for instance, why you want to become a teacher, and hence why I made that point earlier on. So it is worthwhile giving some serious thought to that, because that is taken in consideration. It would be a problem if you said you wanted to become a teacher because of the holidays and the money. I think that would be highly problematic. However, it would depend on the argument you put forward, of course, and a full suite of other kind of criteria that we look at. But I just mentioned that to you because that does matter in relation to your entry requirements. I better move on. What will you do? Well, look, you will do a number of courses that obviously I mentioned before that have been accredited. But what's unique, obviously, about the University of Adelaide experience is that you'll complete what's called a teaching dissertation, which does not occur anywhere that I know of in Australia or overseas. And so the reason why I point this out is because it's actually a signature feature of the degree. And I know a fair bit about it because I supervise a number of students in that teaching dissertation. Not only does it make you highly employable, but it also equips you to become a teacher. And particularly with the focus on the teacher as researcher, it really sets you up nicely, particularly with the trends in education at the moment. I'll move on and I will answer some questions at the end. I'm just conscious of the time, so I'll just move on. This is just an overview of the 1.5 year degree. Now, remember, this is the accelerated program. Remember, you have an option of a 2-year program, but the one I'm just showing you here is if you start at the beginning of the year in January. Just so you're aware here, this first row is what we call a term. And you can see this would be term 1, term 2, term 3, term 4. And then you would have a term 1 in the following year. Now, be aware that there is no reason why if you start at 1.5 years, you can't extend out to 2. It's just harder if you go from 2 years to 1.5, but it is possible. But I just make mention that that would be your study guide, which you have access to when you enroll. There is also an overview available on the university website by the School of Education website page. And then the mid-year intake, and that might be relevant for some of you here. Just note here that you'll be starting here on the research design, and then you'll pick up pretty much with everyone else who starts at the beginning of the year with the curriculum and methodology courses, which are core courses that you'll need to complete. They're the ones in the green. Moving on, these are just some examples of some of the curriculum methodology courses that we have available. We have a lot of international students who pick up on the load option. We have a number of international students in particular with the focus on business and STEM orientated courses. Also, we have domestically, as you can see here, domestically, there's a huge uptake across the board. But I just make mention to some of the uptake for international students, in particular around ESL, LOTE, STEM, and some business orientated subjects, which tend to be quite popular for international students. Degree structure, as I've mentioned before, a unique feature is what's called the research or the teaching dissertation, which you would do over a 6 to 12 month period. You will be supervised by experts in that particular area, and then you would do that in a group type arrangement. However, there will be opportunities for one-on-one tuition as you progress, and you'll submit a written dissertation of about 15 to 20,000 words at the end of that course. Note some of the electives there that you have available to you. And then, of course, I'll just talk very briefly about professional experience. you'll have access to approximately 70 days within schools in the Greater Adelaide area. And of course, we work very hard to place you in your discipline area and in the schools that you want and can benefit from, particularly in relation to very experienced mentors to guide you through that process and that transition period into the teaching profession. As you can see here, the University of Adelaide graduates are highly employable. I note that this is a recent statistic, but I already knew before I started. And since I started, I should point out, so I'm new to the University of Adelaide myself, but since starting, I know that the University of Adelaide graduates are in high demand. In fact, most of the time, a lot of students have jobs lined up before they graduate. So if employability or employment is important to you, and let's face it, it will be, then I would just say to you that University of Adelaide will make you highly employable, particularly for schools. I have some previous students here. Brittany was one of my former students. A lot of these testimonials are available on the website for you to have a look at. So I'm not going to read through those. You're welcome to have a look at some of those testimonials in your own time. Same here by Fiona. And I just want to say thank you for listening. Just note that there's some further information available to you. There's my email address if you feel like you need to contact me or if you want to ask any questions. And of course, I haven't listed there, but there's the Faculty of Education generic email, which is also someone who you can contact if you need to at some point in the future. So thanks for listening, and I will open it up for any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Dr. Stolz. Okay, so now it's your turn to ask any questions that you might have. Whilst you're thinking of a couple of questions, we have received a few already. So Stephen, I was wondering if you could answer these. The first one is, would it be possible to have two quite similar teaching areas, such as senior history, combined with HASS?
That is a possibility, and there are a number of students who do have that combination. So it's not uncommon to have, like HASS, for instance, as a kind of middle, like as a minor, which means you can teach, from foundations through to year 10, and then a senior kind of elective or major in history. So be aware if you do qualify for senior history, it also means you can teach history from foundation through to year 12. So the answer is yes. Yeah.
Thank you. So another question that's come through, if you have achieved a first class honours degree at the University of Adelaide, how does that factor into entry requirements, for example, GPA and transcript?
Well, I would say that the fact that you're a graduate from the University of Adelaide, that is taken into consideration. Your only challenge would be how you would go about identifying your two teaching areas. So I would have a follow-up question. That is, what was the degree, and then what would your two kind of teaching areas be if I asked you that?
Okay, great. Someone else has asked, when do applications open for entry for the beginning of next year?
Oh, I might have to defer to my colleagues on recruitment on that one. I think it would be towards the end of this year for 2021.
Yeah, I can actually answer that. They're open now, so students can apply now, and then they can obviously be assessed for starting for the beginning of next year. So they are open now. Okay, so we've got a few questions coming through. Is it possible to teach the specialisations of accounting and business studies from the Bachelor of Commerce?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Are they saying they've completed the degree and then entering the MTeach, and then the two teaching areas?
So.
Yeah.
I think the teaching areas, yes. Accounting and business studies.
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay, great. Okay. You've mentioned that the course can be completed in 1.5 years. However, on the website, it mentions that the degree can be completed in 1.25 years. Okay.
There's been a recent amendment, and thanks for bringing that to my attention. I'll make sure that's updated. It's the minimum is 1.5 years. And do be aware, when I say accelerated, it is a very, very intense workload. And you wouldn't want to do it less than 1.5, because 1.5 is actually very, very intense as it is. May I ask where that 1.25 years was located so I can get it amended?
I think it might be on Degree Finder.
Okay, what I'm going to do is
we can get that amended.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thanks, Kate. I'm just taking a note. I'm making a note here myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's some more questions that have come in. Can you explain what happens during the teacher placement at high schools?
Okay, you'll be placed, so there are a number of placement blocks, and usually in your in the first half, well, pretty much straight away, you will undertake some form of placement, and that usually is a variation of an observation and some teaching. So you'll be slowly introduced to teaching with the idea by the time you get to the end of your degree, you'll have close to a full-time teaching load. And so the idea is that you start with observations and slowly transition, depending on where you are in your degree, in relation to how much teaching you'll do within schools. Ideally, you'll be placed according to your discipline area within a school. You'll be buddied up, if you like, with a mentor. If people, I'm not sure that's a term you use here, but you will be assigned a mentor and what's called a university liaison. And that university liaison will meet with you on placement and just check to see how things are going, to see that you're receiving the mentor kind of and guidance that you need according to where you are in your degree. So clearly, if it's the first semester, first year, you're going to need a lot more supervision and mentorship than if you're in your, in the last part or last semester of your degree. And that would be just an expectation of your kind of degree. And so it's highly structured, highly organized. It's there to support you in your transition into the professions. And we work very closely with the schools, and we make sure that you are supported fully whilst you're on placement. So you have every opportunity to achieve success. Great,
thank you. Another question that's come through, are teaching placements also available in rural areas of South Australia?
The answer is yes, however, that's been put on hold because of COVID-19. So my understanding, and please don't hold me to this, is that may be reintroduced post-COVID-19, whenever that will be. Hopefully,
okay, great.
Hopefully towards the end of the year.
Thank you. So another question is, what is the difference between English and senior English teaching areas? And are the entry requirements for these two different?
Okay, so the first part is the difference is that one is senior, and that's through the SACE, or what's called the South Australian Certificate of Education. And that's high stakes type of testing, where students who are in 11 and 12 obviously need a ATAR score. So if they want to go to a university like the University of Adelaide, they can receive an ATAR that they want for prerequisites to get into the degrees that they want. Now that's high stakes, and hence why you need to spend a fair bit of time learning how to teach for 11 and 12. Middle years, if you like, or secondary part of middle years, well, that's anything from foundation through to year 10, and that's the Australian curriculum. So we're talking about what's called a curriculum framework documents. So currently, as we stand, we have Australian curriculum nationwide. Different jurisdictions call them different terms, but we're talking about the Australian curriculum. That's foundation through to 10 across all curriculum areas. And then 11 and 12, at the moment, they're slowly introducing the Australian curriculum for 11 and 12. So they're just piloting that at the moment. However, being in SA or South Australia, our jurisdiction is obviously the South Australian Curriculum Board, the Curriculum Certificate of Education. And that's obviously provides students with an ATAR, which they need to obviously, if they want to go to university, they can. So there is a significant difference.
Great, thank you. So we have a question, what about subject specialisations that are not on the subject area list, such as Auslan? Would you need to make sure you have 2 of the prescribed subjects?
Currently at the moment, we don't cater for a specialisation in Auslan. We review this on a regular basis. However, at the moment, like a lot of universities, it's demand driven. And so if there was a demand, well, then that's something we possibly could introduce. However, at the moment, I'm not aware of a demand. And so that's hence one of the reasons why it doesn't exist. But that doesn't mean it can't change. And in terms of answering your question, then you'd need to factor for that. If we don't have that as a specialisation, you would need to look closely about what your two teaching areas are.
Okay, thank you. Someone has asked, they're finishing the bachelor degree at the end of this year. How do they apply for the Master of Teaching?
So there's an online form that you would complete. Kate, you might have a little bit more detail around the specifics of the fields than I would.
Yes. In terms of the application, you would just apply through SATAC. Get your application in as soon as possible to avoid a late fee. And you can use your transcripts that you have up until now. And then if you are successful, you may receive a conditional offer based on you satisfactorily completing your year and in your current bachelor degree by the end of this year. Okay, so there's lots of questions here. For someone living out of Adelaide, for example, Clare Valley, how many contact hours per week would be required? Would I be required to move into the city or to Adelaide to complete the Masters?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer because it's not necessarily about contact time because, as you know, contact time is only one part of the equation. Sometimes whatever your contact time might be, you need to double it in terms of the work that you'll need. So you might need access to the library. So my advice to anyone, where possible, is that I would encourage to kind of live in the greater, kind of Adelaide area so you can access the resources. We have fantastic resources. And I would encourage you to kind of live near the campus, which you would have access, so you can access it, particularly the library, which is fantastic. I use it all the time. So it's not as simple as saying it's 20 hours and then multiply it by 2 in terms of the work you need to do. But I would say to you that if you're doing the intensive mode, you're not going to have much time for full-time work or even part-time work. So sometimes you need to consider about whether the 1.5 years is for you or you do the 2-year option, which just makes it a little bit more manageable. And then maybe you might be able to work part-time. So there's a few things where I've had some conversations with students in relation to this. I can understand why you might want to finish at 1.5 years. However, if you are juggling all sorts of other kind of life commitments, such as work and family, sometimes the 2-year option is sometimes of an option that might work for you. And so I'm just very hesitant to kind of put an hourly time on that. I mean, I could give you one if you wanted to, but it's straight away, it's not going to be accurate because of the things that you'll need to do and the expectations that will be required of you as a student. Sorry, that was a bit of a long-winded answer, that one. I feel like my father kind of lecturing me, kind of thing. Sorry, everyone, I don't mean to lecture anyone, but I'm just letting you know the realities of the degree, particularly the accelerated intensive mode. Yeah.
Sure, thank you. Okay, I think this next question, the student may have completed one study area. So they've asked, is it possible to complete a Diploma of Arts alongside the Master of Teaching to complete the prerequisites for the specialist subject area?
The answer is no to that one. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. This student has a psychology degree with a minor in philosophy, but also wants to teach English, but did not study in their undergraduate.
Well, the simple answer is no, you can't do it concurrently. But that does not mean you can't find the second teaching area. So even though I might say no, and that's not meant to be black and white as an answer, I guess could say I want to qualify that a little bit more by saying that I would need to look at your transcripts and you'd need to make an argument for why you have kind of 2 teaching areas, which I think you could. So that would be on a case-by-case basis, that one.
And the student could also do the Diploma of Arts and get the courses required within that diploma to get that specialisation as well. Okay, so, gosh, there's lots of questions here. Do teachers ever get the chance to teach stage 1 and stage 2 after graduating from the Master of Teaching?
Well, yeah, the answer is yes. In most instances, our graduates are nicely positioned to teach 11 and 12. And in fact, there are a lot of graduates who obviously find work and teach in the senior space. That's unusual. Usually experienced teachers get access to senior subjects because you need obviously time to understand your craft of teaching and experience what it means to go through a life of a school year, dealing with some of the structures and constraints of what it means to be a school teacher in very large organisations most of the time, in very complex systems. But the answer is yeah, that is a real possibility and does happen.
Okay. This next question, is it unusual for someone studying health and medical sciences to then do a Master of Teaching?
No.
I guess.
I mean, I have MTeach students who've done PhDs in science. I've had PhDs who've in law, medicine. Medicine, not at this institution, but in medicine. So the answer is yeah.
Okay. Is there any possibility of a creative writing specialisation applying to an English teaching area?
That's a good question. I would say to you, you need to do more units or courses in literature, because as part of the curriculum, you will focus more on literature-related studies. Now, that's not to say that there isn't a focus on styles and genres of writing. That's not what I'm saying, because clearly that is a part of the English curriculum. However, as part of your argument, if you like, why you want to have that as a teaching specialisation for English, there would be a prerequisite around kind of literature, English literature studies.
Thank you. Could any credit be given towards the degree based on completed undergrad teaching subjects or placements?
Yes, and your argument that you would put forward for why you want a credit for X, Y, and Z, you just need to make sure you have alignment with current existing courses. And you need to obviously, in your argument, highlight why you think you need credit for, say, course X, Y, and Z here at the University of Adelaide. That's something that would then come to me after it's obviously been vetted, and I would make that final decision myself.
Okay, and also what courses come under the STEM and the HASS classification?
Oh, sorry, I use STEM as an example because most people understand that STEM stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So I use that as an umbrella term as I was speaking quickly here, but that's what I mean by STEM. Which we have, which other than engineering, which we don't have as a specialisation, we obviously cater for the other three in the four-part acronym.
I think that question might relate to what courses come under STEM. So would it be 4 or 6 science subjects, or could it be a combination of science and maths?
So obviously you can elect to do mathematics and then a science. And then of course, and that's a very common combination. And then you can elect to just do generalist science, or you can elect to do a specialist or a specialisation in science like chem, physics, bio, earth science. They are specialisation at a senior level.
And HASS, so that would be a combination of
humanities. So I'll go through this quickly. So off the top of my head, so we've got humanities, we don't have social science because that would be inclusive under the HASS umbrella, but you've got history, and then we have normally legal would come under that, and geography, and what have I missed here? I was just looking at this the other day, I'm sorry.
History?
Yeah, I think I said history at the start. History, and I said geography. They're the main kind of groupings. I'm just looking at my list here, where we would group those. Yeah.
Okay, someone has asked if we have 3 possible teaching areas and we aren't sure if our GPA for one subject will be high enough, how do we go about applying with all options?
I would say to you that you could do a number of things. You could make a general inquiry to see which combination is going to give you the GPA you need, or you could probably do your own calculations. But I would encourage you to first seek some assistance from the student admin team at the Faculty of Arts, who will be able to assist you in determining which is the best combination for you, so you have success, with your application. So clearly we want you to have success. And obviously one way to kind of determine your correct derivation, or if you like, sequence of teaching areas, is just to kind of play with the numbers a little bit. And the student admin team, who are fantastic, who I work with very closely, will be able to help you with that.
Okay, and someone's asked, do we have to complete the Landtite before starting the degree?
No, at some point during your degree, you will need to complete it though. Preferably, you're going to have it completed before you finish your degree anyway, because it's a requirement. But preferably, you would complete it at some point in your first year. Yeah.
Okay, when working at a school, are you limited to teaching just your teaching specialisations?
No. I mean, in an ideal world, you'll have both. You'll have placement for both discipline areas or both curriculum areas. But if it means being placed into one kind of curriculum area, and there's a possibility that means you can get placement, well, then that's an option that's usually considered if it means placing someone in the correct sequence of their degree, rather than moving outside of the sequence and delaying their degrees. And so I would just encourage anyone that if it's in your generalist area, just take that as an opportunity. So there are opportunities, yes, but I can't say it happens all the time, because it doesn't.
Okay, one student has done their own research and noticed that earth and environmental science is less common than the other science majors. From your understanding, is it hard to find employment in this specialisation?
It's interesting how they did that research. Do they mean research in terms of employment prospects? I'm assuming that's what they mean.
I would understand. I think that's what they mean.
Yeah. Most of the time when it comes to employment, like most places of employment, you do your own research or search, based on curriculum areas that schools are advertising for. So I am going to get your answer, trust me, I am. The reality will be that earth science is not offered by all schools, whereas math, science and the core kind of curriculum subjects are. So if this is about employability, then of course, maths and science, humanities related subjects like HAS related subjects, you are more likely to be employed if you have teaching specializations in those areas. Clearly. However, that doesn't mean if you have a kind of earth science or one of the more obscure kind of teaching areas like legal or even psychology, doesn't mean you won't be employed at some point somewhere. My answer to all these questions is that if you're prepared to move regional or even interstate, of course, you will always get a job. It just depends on your circumstances. And obviously one of those circumstances, obviously, if you want to move, where you want to work, kind of what your teaching areas are, and so on and so forth. So sorry, it's a long-winded answer, but I just want to make people aware that like any employment market, it will be demand driven. And clearly at the moment, there will be demand around maths and science because there's a shortage of maths and science teachers.
Okay, another question. This is a long one. A student's about to graduate from an engineering and science double degree, and they want to move into education. They're planning to do a Master of Education, but also want a certificate to be a teacher. Would it make sense for the student to do the Master of Teaching first and then a Masters of Education?
Yeah, I think that sequence matters here. If you usually at MEd, and I am in the MEd program, I have a number of MEd subjects, they're course related ones. I also have a number of PhD students. usually post-grad space around MEd and above, so MEd and PhD and so on, is usually for someone who wants to progress in their career in the educational space. And they've either been a teacher for a number of years or moved to middle management, or they're deputy principals and they need that to become a principal, and so on and so forth. I would encourage you, if you want to teach in particular, that you'd need to complete the MTeach first. And then I would then encourage you to teach for a period of time, and then come back and see me if you want to do an MEd. So the sequence does matter, particularly if you want to become a teacher. And then of course, if you want to progress in the teaching profession, well then of course, then an MEd and above, you might start MEd coursework is a necessary kind of requirement. So that's why I say, start with the MEd. If teaching's for you, you want to teach as a career, start there, and then we could, kind of talk after a year or two.
Okay, and I think we've got one more question. What's the process in an individual case where a student does not meet the recommended GPA for the postgraduate degree?
Well, it's a criteria, and because it's a criteria, it's looked at very closely. And like anything, if you don't meet the minimum criteria, it doesn't progress. Now, I know that sounds very harsh, but you've got to remember the University of Adelaide is in high demand. And so there's a reason why we have entry requirements.
Okay, I think there's one last quick question. How many units do we have to complete for it to be considered a minor teaching area?
Units, so they've completed a degree somewhere else. And okay, unfortunately, I can't answer that because each institution have different kind of minimum requirements around their kind of teaching degrees. So, for instance, the University of Adelaide uses different terminology and so on. But all I would say to you, you would need at least, more than kind of, if you like, 6 or more kind of subjects, courses, if you like. So standalone, let's call them standalone kind of units, if that makes sense. So 6 or more, but be aware, different universities have different credit point structures. And so 6 might seem like a lot, but it's actually not. So that's why I say it's very difficult for me to kind of answer that accurately and definitively, because I can only give you a University of Adelaide kind of point of view here on that one. So I'm kind of guesstimating.
Okay, sure. And there's hopefully the last of the last questions. A student is asking what they need to do to check if they meet the criteria. Is it just to apply, or is there something else that they need to do if they're not sure?
I think you can do a self-assessment. I think you can go through and you can quickly do it now with me. Do you have a bachelor's degree or near completion? Can you clearly identify 2 kind of teaching areas, like a major and minor? Yes, no. Third one is, do you have a GPA of around 5? Yes, no. And then the fourth one, well, of course, you're not going to be able to say yes or no, but you complete the teaching capability statement. You need to give some thought about how you would answer the question, i.e. or e.g., why do you want to become a teacher? So the 3 series of questions relate broadly around that question. That's why I talked about it, because it does matter. You need to give some thought to that.
Great. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you everyone for attending and submitting your questions to Dr. Steven Stolz. Remember, if you have any questions, you can contact us at any time with questions relating to the Master of Teaching or any courses at all at the University of Adelaide. Thanks, and it's bye for now.
See you later, everyone.